Welcome to the Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, the weekly show where science meets soul and mom chaos meets mind mastery. You're not just a mom. You're a woman with dreams, a career, a body that needs care, and a soul that craves more. This podcast is your permission slip to stop surviving and start thriving in motherhood, health, career, and stress resilience. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Rath, and every week we bring you actionable insights and transformative conversations to help you create a life you truly love. From evidence-based wellness strategies to authentic self-discovery, we'll explore what it takes to thrive through expert interviews and real unfiltered stories. Let's dive into today's episode. Today's guest has dedicated his life to helping men break free from the patterns of their past so they can step into their true identity and purpose. Michael Ayala-White is the founder of Wayward Coaching, a trauma-informed certified coach, and ACC candidate who specializes in guiding men through their inner child work, somatic healing, and deep mindset shifts. He has years of experience in faith-based and nonprofit work and helps men restore the parts of themselves they've lost, whether through addiction, trauma, or life's curveballs. This is so they can lead as better partners, fathers, and leaders. His approach blends compassion with real actionable tools, making him a voice of hope and transformation for men everywhere. And we're going to dive deeper into what that looks like. So welcome, Mike.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Super grateful to be on and to just have a good conversation about some really important stuff.
I love it. I'm super excited too. And I know most of our listeners are women and they're thinking like, what the heck? How does a conversation about men's identity and healing apply to me? But really the truth is all in what lives in relationship with men. So, your partner, father, brother, son, coworker, or friend, and really kind of understanding that inner battle that men face because let's be real, not all men like to talk about that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and this creates, right? This creates that deeper communication, healthier boundaries, and more of this balanced dynamic in our homes and in our workplaces.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
I'm excited to have you on. Even
hmm
if you specialize in men, I think it's so important to understand that. So I'd love to just start by your story. So who you are, where you come from, how you got to where you are, and I think our stories are so powerful. So I'm going to
Yeah,
give you the mic.
thank you so much for having me on again. Yeah, so, grew up and based out of Buffalo, New York. Grew up and experienced a lot of trauma in my own life, different forms of abuse as a kid. Didn't really
Mm,
know that that was the case at the time because when you're in it, you just feel like that's normal. And so as I became an adult and kind of came into my own, hmm, I started to realize very quickly that I had different gifts of like external communication and teaching and things like that. So as I began to grow in kind of the faith realm, what I also didn't understand was that like my own internal addictions were growing at the same time. I didn't understand the relationship between trauma, stress, and addiction. And
mm,
so I didn't have any language for it. I didn't have any understanding of it whatsoever. And so for myself, as I was growing in influence and understanding a bit more of my external gifts, my internal world was chaotic and a mess. And I had no framework for how to actually talk about all this stuff that I was experiencing. And one of the most common misconceptions about men is that we don't feel. I hear that a lot from their spouses. Is it's like he's just a robot, and I'm like, no, he's not a robot. I promise.
mm-hmm.
There's either some really serious things that have gone on where he has shut himself off, or he is feeling. He's either doesn't know how to name it, doesn't have the language for it, and certainly doesn't know how to actually converse about what's actually going on inside. So as all this stuff was going on internally, I also was married at the time. I had all these internal things going on, including an addiction to pornography and sex that I just didn't know what to do with. And especially in the faith realm, there's
Mm-hmm.
this spoken sometimes and very unspoken shame, particularly around that particular thing. And there's a stigma about it. And so my life came to a screeching halt in 2019 when my internal world and all the stuff that was happening was discovered. And I spent the next 3 years really just in a tailspin of trying to figure out what is wrong with me? Why can I not stop what I'm doing? If I believe what I say I believe, why does my life and my actions not match that? And so, really, over the next 3 years from 2019 to 2022 was a lot of wandering, a lot of brokenness, and a lot of questions and searching of what do I believe? Where is there good help to figure out, like, how do I actually walk free from this? And really, in 2022 is when I started to get some traction, kind of going to a 2 week intensive program and realizing a holistic solution to a holistic problem. Addiction itself and trauma are not just a problem of the mind or the body or the soul. It's all of you is affected by trauma. And so if trauma and addiction are holistic problems, then you need a holistic solution. And so for me, that's part of what I learned coming out of there for my own self, and then went back to school and got certified in some different certifications to help men in particular realize that number one, with addiction as a whole, you're not born this way. You're made this way. If you were made that way, you can be unmade and remade. Number two, trauma itself doesn't have to define you. And number three, what does rediscovering and recovering who you were meant to be before things happened look like in your life? So that's a quick synopsis of my story where this isn't just some hobby to me. This is part of the trajectory of my own life that I've had to really walk the dark nights of the soul out personally to figure out what the heck is going on down here and then realize that there actually is a path forward. And that's why I want to work with men now, really where I was, to help them figure out, like, hey, there's an example of the other side. And I don't have it all figured out, but I do have a few steps for you to take that could point you in the right direction.
I think your story is super powerful, and I think there is so much more addiction in that realm of pornography and sex, and, I mean, I think people see, like, drugs and, um, sometimes alcohol, not always,
Mhm.
as an addiction, but it's so much more common than I think people even realize in our society. Do you have the stats on that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So 2024, Barna research, like Barna in kind of the faith realm and Pew and some others have really set the standard as far as like every 5 to 10 years doing another survey to figure out like where things are.
Mhm.
What's recorded, and which means the people that have actually participated is that it's around 67% of guys, and north of
Wow.
um,
Which is
if
probably
you're
more than that if it's just the
yeah,
recorded,
yeah.
right?
So the kind of the what's the word? Kind of the thought process is like that's what's recorded, so go a little bit higher. I would push
Mhm.
into the 70 to 80%. Um, at least at some point, I would go higher. 70, 80% of men one point struggled with pornography, if not still actively do.
Sure.
And then for women, it's north of 50%, between 50
Wow.
and 55%. Yeah. Especially with the younger generations. The accessibility at their fingertips, along with like the age of exposure is continuing to get younger and younger and younger. Right now, it's around 8 years old, is when.
8?
Mhm, yep.
Oh my gosh, my oldest turns 8 this week as we're speaking.
Yeah.
That's
Yes. So,
insane.
mhm. So with like the guys that are the generations above me, I think my oldest client is 71. Um, like those guys have stories of like random, they found their dad's magazines, or like some of them, as strange as it sounds, they walking through the woods and found a random magazine stashed somewhere.
Yeah.
That's their stories.
Uh-huh.
For my story and for people my generation and younger, I mean, you're talking right
Yeah.
here,
At your
you know,
fingertips at
and the
any second, at any
accessibility. Yeah.
moment.
So
Yeah.
what ends up happening for a lot of the guys is they're exposed to this stuff at an early age, and their brain has no reference point of how to process it. And
Mm.
because this part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, really doesn't fully develop until your mid to late 20s, depending on if you're male or female, you're talking about living here in the midbrain, which is all emotion and not reason and consequence and logic up here. So you're interpreting and filtering this stuff with an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old brain, and it just doesn't have the computing power at that point to really understand what's going on. All it
Yeah.
knows is that it's curious, and depending on your story and what you've already experienced, there's probably a good chance that you like what you saw. That's all
Right.
you know at that point. And so now the seeds for addiction are already planted
Mm.
because the reality of early childhood trauma, exposure at an early age, and the brain doesn't know what to do. And typically, there's either a lack of communication about sexuality as a whole in the home, or in the faith community, it's don't have sex until you're married. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. But there's not really a
Mm-hmm.
conversation around the reality of, regardless of what you believe, we are sexual beings. And in the right context, it's very, very, very healthy and beautiful. We just need to learn what that looks like at the age appropriate levels. And since
Right.
that foundation isn't there, all you know is I'm curious and it feels good and I can't talk to my parents. And so I'm going to now hide. And
Mm.
now you have got the perfect, perfect seedbed for the seeds of addiction to just flourish.
Mm. That's both frightening and eye-opening all at the
Yeah.
same time as a
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah. It is 8 years old.
That's insane to me, like, my brain can't even fathom that. I feel
Yeah.
like sometimes I'm a little naive because I did grow up in a I fall in the category of don't have sex till you're married, it's bad, but after that, like, we just don't talk about it. So, I
Right.
was in that other category of, we just don't talk about it. And I find that really interesting. So, um let me ask you this. Let's go back to your story a little bit if you don't mind. But was there, I mean, you have some specific dates in there. And I think because it is so prevalent, I mean, you're talking 60, high 60s, let's just say 70% ish
Mhm.
of percent of men and a little bit lower for women, but not as much as I thought
Mhm.
originally. But was there like a turning point? Because if this many people are viewing and have this addiction, is it becoming like acceptable? And then at what point is it like that aha moment for you of like, this is not okay anymore?
Mm. Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. So, two things to that. One, it depends on like, so toxic shame is a big buzzword now, as it should be. Brene Brown and many others have done just groundbreaking work on the experience of toxic shame for human beings. Um, and
Can you
kind of,
explain that a little bit more for our viewers and what that
yes,
means?
thank you. So, real quickly, like let's just define the difference between guilt and shame because they get kind of lumped together, and I think it's really, really, really important, specifically in the work that I do, to pull them apart. Guilt is I have done something wrong. And I
Mm.
actually think that guilt is very, very, very healthy because it does two things. Number one, it shows that you're not a sociopath. Like it shows that you
Mhm.
genuinely are like, yeah, I missed it here. And we all do. But number two, it shows that you're operating outside your conscience and your morals and your ethics and what you feel is important. So guilt can actually let you know, I missed it here. And that's okay. When we've
Yeah.
actually done something wrong, that's really, really healthy. Toxic shame is there is something permanently wrong with me and it can never be fixed.
Mm.
Toxic shame, Brene Brown and many others have done a lot of work on showing the effects on the brain, on the body, on relationships internally with yourself and externally with your loved ones and people about how it disconnects. It almost shuts down this part of your brain like a dimmer. And now you're stuck here in the mid part where all your trauma is with the amygdala and hypothalamus and other stuff.
Mm.
Um, and so I think what has happened as a whole in our culture is because toxic shame, and I'm talking particularly in the West, because toxic shame is so intense of an experience, it's one of the top three experiences we can have. We've done a great job at figuring out how to be shameless. And so we
Mm.
throw off anything that makes us feel shame. And so, depending on what you believe and think, pornography as a whole can be like, no, it's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. It's not that big of a deal. But what the studies have shown, even the studies as a whole that have nothing to do with faith, are showing that it disconnects many relationships, because what ends up happening is you're rewiring your brain for performance.
Mm.
Because the reality of pornography is that it's an act.
Yeah.
It's not real
Mhm.
life. And there's so many levels to this that we could spend the rest of the time just talking about this, but I'll try to frame it. The reality of pornography is it creates performance. It creates a unrealistic expectation on both the male and the female in the acts. In, like, not to get too graphic, but just like the longevity of the act itself on one side, like the reality of the acrobaticness of all of it. It's just like, hey, this is
Right.
not real. And what it does is it creates disconnection
Yeah.
from the person with themselves and with their partner. Because
For
now,
expectations
mhm,
versus reality.
correct. Now you're training your mind to be like, this is what I expect of myself and of my partner. And when that's not met, I have low key resentments that my sex life is not what it should be. But
Mm.
all the while, you are training your mind and your body to engage in something that is not real. And so
Mm.
what ends up happening is when you have low key resentments toward your partner because your sex life isn't what it isn't what it should be. Well, now you start to live in fantasy.
Yeah.
Now you start to disconnect even more from your partner because they can't live up to this unrealistic expectation. But this person on this video can. And
Mm.
now you're slowly, emotionally, and even physically moving away from your partner and into yourself. And there's so many reasons for this. And the reality of childhood trauma, like the concept of entitlement, which is very common with men with addictions. I would say people with addictions, but just because I work with men. And entitlement is actually due to emotional neglect in the reality of their upbringing. And so because the child didn't get what they needed over here, as soon as they get a little bit of power, it's like, hell or high water, I'm going to get what I want. And it's,
Mm.
hmm. And that's where addiction just lives, is in entitlement. When marriage and deep relationship and partnership require sacrifice and compromise. But there's no space for that in addiction. It's all about the person. So for me, to get to the second part of your question, the first part is that I think it's the unspoken epidemic in our culture, inside and outside of faith. It's more understood in terms of the faith community because there's a different level of like morality and kind of standard with regards to sexuality as a whole.
Mhm.
But it's affecting across the board. I have people and clients that are in the faith community and outside the faith community, and both their spouses and them are like, this is a problem. Where it
Yeah.
reaches that point for most guys, unfortunately, and I wish it weren't this way, and my story is this way, I had to get caught.
Mm.
The better story is I woke up one day and went, enough's enough. I can't do this anymore. I'm operating outside my own morality and my own ethics. I'm harming my spouse. That's not my story, and that's not most guys' stories. I wish it was, but for most of us, we have to get caught.
Is
And
most of
then,
it secretive? Do
um,
most spouses not know?
that's a great question. I would say that. So I want to be very, very, very gentle here, because I'm feel like I'm walking the tightrope of. I know most of the audience is women, so and this will tie back into your question. Most guys don't have the same conversation with their dad as I think most women have conversations with their mom or their guardian,
Right.
because
Yeah.
our bodies are different. Like
Mhm.
women wake up one day in that like pubescent period
Yeah.
and they're like, something's wrong with me. Like,
Mhm.
why am I bleeding? Like,
It's literally a light switch, like on
correct.
off. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
So women have to have a there's a conversation had about their bodies and how to know their bodies and
Right.
understand their bodies that most guys, we just don't have that conversation. We wake up and something happens with us, but our dads are like, works fine, you're all set, and it's like that's kind of about it. And so the reason I bring that up is because most of the partners that I've talked with, of the men that I've worked with, there's something along the lines of, I knew something was wrong.
Mm.
because there's this kind of, you can't see, there's like this intuitive feeling down in the gut, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
gut is associated with safety and protection. That's why the phrase trust your gut kind of comes around. There's this feeling, and they can't put their finger on it, and they don't have any like legit evidence, but they feel like something's off here. I don't know what it is, but, and then it comes out and they're like, I knew it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was in the way of our relationship. And so some partners know where they're like, yes, like he has told me or I've discovered it. And I think some partners know and they either don't want to know or they don't know the details of what it is. And I don't want to speak
Sure.
for them, but
Right. Yeah.
that's my experience with working with partners on that side of the street, is kind of walking with them and going, so you did know, you just didn't even knew that,
Right.
but you knew
Yeah. Almost
something.
like a subconscious, like
Mhm.
it's there, but it's not really in our awareness.
Correct. And
Yeah.
um man, like, again, part of that conversation with knowing your body is, I think that helps women to develop this intuition that men can have. We're just not, we don't have that same relationship with our bodies most of the time. We live from the neck up. Everything is intellect for us, and we do not have a good relationship with our bodies. And that's part of the
I
work that I do, is to try to help guys reestablish that brain body connection so
mm,
that they can then understand what's going on in their internal world so they don't blow their life up again because they were ignoring it most of the time, and all of a sudden everything comes out sideways. But the fact is that there were warning signs for days, months, years probably. They just ignored it, didn't know what it meant. And then all of a sudden this sideways behavior comes out. And it's like, that's not random. Your body was actually trying to tell you that we're in trouble for a while. You just didn't have the relationship to understand what was actually going on.
tell me more about that. Like now getting into your work, like what do you see are some warning signs or even like what have you discovered about men or their identity or their, physical symptoms or non-physical, like, mentally, emotional, etc., that maybe surprised you or that are pretty common, both common and surprised you that are maybe warning signs that, hey, you're not really in touch with that.
Yeah. Okay. So part of the way that I view human beings is I view us as four-dimensional beings: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that's not, I didn't invent that. That's been around for a very long time. Like
Oh,
mind,
right.
soul,
Yep.
mind, spirit. Like that's so. Um, I'll walk through each domain to your question. So in the physical, what I have noticed almost every time is the guys with serious addiction problems do not have a good relationship or any relationship with their body. And what I mean by
Mm,
that is they know when they're hungry, they may know when they're angry, and they definitely know when they're tired and maybe horny. And that's about it. But what they don't understand is they don't know the stress level of their bodies. They don't know how to identify their emotions. They don't know where they live in their body. And they're not listening to their body on the daily to figure out, where am I today? Today is Wednesday. Where am I on a Wednesday? Because where I am on a Wednesday could be different than where I was on a Tuesday. And it probably could be different from where I am tomorrow if I make it to tomorrow. So they don't have the relationship to be able to check in with themselves and go, what's going on in my body? Where do I carry tension in my body? Is it in my neck? Is it in my shoulders? Is it in my lower back? For some people, it's in their arms. Like, where do I carry the tension? Because all of those things are signals for us that when we feel that, something's going on. Those are the warning signs that, hey, we're not in that middle of our what's called the window of tolerance, right? We're kind of pushing up out of the window into anxiety, kind of fight or flight, or we're dropping down out of the bottom of our window into like freeze or shutdown. And if we can understand how our bodies feel, even if we don't know what we're feeling, we at least can know, man, I'm really tense. Like I'm grind like people, you know, grind their teeth in their sleep. That's a sign for me where I'm like, okay, you're carrying a lot of stress. If you're
mhm.
grinding your teeth in your sleep, like what's going on down in here that is so intense that the only way your body knows how to relieve the stress is to grind your teeth in your sleep. That's a pretty good sign that there's probably some sort of trauma that has been experienced that needs to be dealt with. The mental, um, the mental beliefs, there's a ton of shame. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of toxic shame. Up here in Buffalo, we have a lot of older homes. And up here, we have basements. And the joke is not how much water do you have, or do you have water in your basement? It's how much water do you have?
Hmm.
There's almost always some sort of water because it's all swampland. And in case people don't know, it snows in Buffalo 300 days a year is what it feels like. So it's always wet in the basement. So toxic shame for men is the same way, which is like, it's not about do you have it, it's about how much is it. And for most men, they're drowning in toxic shame. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. Their dad wasn't there, he beat the heck out of them. There's sexual abuse, there's neglect, there's bullying, there's all sorts of things that create this initial experience of toxic shame. And now, if that doesn't get repaired by the parents, that gets internalized. And that becomes what we would call a rooted negative belief, which
Hmm.
is I am permanently broken, or I am not enough, or I am ugly, or I am blank. And again, this is for both sides of the street. This is not exclusive to men. Brene Brown has done a ton of work on how toxic shame affects women and the
Right.
reality of external beauty and all of it. And the different seasons of that, of like growing up to like having kids, to the shift and pulling out these like internal beliefs. But the shame is high. And for men, what I found is the higher the level of shame, the lower the level of curiosity about themselves and other people. And this
Mm.
is why most partners will tell me he's here, but he's not really here. And there's not the ability to be empathetic with her and sit with her in her pain, in her processing, because he can't sit with himself. So how could he possibly sit with anybody else? So part of my work is to help the guys where when their shame is really, really high and their curiosity is low, to create an environment where the shame can come down and now the inverse is true. We can start to be curious about how did the shame get there in the first place?
Right.
Why did it stay there? Why is it ruling your life? What would happen and who are you without your shame? So that's the mental. The emotional is very similar. Shame, loneliness, hurt, disgust, distrust. All these emotions are in there, but they don't have the words for it. So for me, it's helping them to define what they're feeling so that they can now have a language to take to me, themselves, and to their partner to go, I didn't realize that I've been lonely my whole life.
Mm.
Like I was 30 years old the first time I heard a man say that he was lonely. And I was like, I have felt that my entire life. I didn't even know it. But you naming it gave me permission to feel it.
Sure.
And then for the spiritual, the question that I ask the guys that I work with that are do have a faith background is like, where is God in the picture for you? Where is he positioned? And part of that is because depending on where he is, it will represent their relationship with God and how they view him. And typically it's in massive judgment, in disgust, somewhere absent. And a lot of that has to do with what's called spiritual attachment wounds, which is your first exposure to any type of godlike figure is your parents. And depending on your relationship with your parents, it's going to probably affect how you view God. So if your
Mm.
father was unbelievably aloof and absent, like you are going to view, there's a good chance you're going to view God as aloof and absent. If he was hard on you and physically and emotionally abusive, it's going to be difficult for you to pray to God as in the Christian faith we understand as Father. And
Yeah.
so all of that is going to affect your relationship with your higher power. And we want to kind of work through like, how has this stuff affected that as well? So that's really like kind of the common things that I see in men. And then the last thing that I think is almost universally true across the board at this point is there's a good chance that if you have low EQ or low emotional intelligence, like if you take a test and you score low on it, there's a good chance that you have some sort of addiction. They almost go hand in hand
Hmm.
because over here, with all the stuff that has happened in early childhood, you don't know how to process it. Your parents aren't teaching you vocabulary to how to express your emotions or creating a safe environment. Now your emotional intelligence is low. Well, what fills the gap? What fills the gap is addiction. What fills the gap is, well, I don't need anybody for pornography. It's just me. And it makes me
Right.
feel good. And I can get some form of pseudo relationship and I can hide it because my parents don't want to hear it. And that's just one example. Alcohol, drugs, sex, eating, gambling, pick your thing. The
Right.
root are the same. Some
Hmm.
sort of early childhood trauma or neglect, discovery at the developmental ages. No one talks about it, and off we go. And now you're talking about, by the time it's revealed normally, there's at least a decade, if not decades, of wiring your brain in this direction before you either get caught or confess. And now there's real work to do to try to rewire your brain.
Hmm. That's wild and absolutely fascinating because I I think there's so much societal expectation too, and I feel like society doesn't teach us, especially men. Women, I think, is becoming a little bit more acceptable. But growing up, it was like, be tough, toughen up. Like, we're not weak. Like,
Mhm.
especially the phrase like guys don't cry, which I think that one is finally starting to, hang its towel up.
Yeah.
But I think these societal things of the old patterns, I mean, you talk about epigenetics and
Mhm.
these neurological wirings, they've been wired in these patterns for decades.
Correct.
Um, so do you feel like, these societal expectations are playing a pretty significant role still?
Um,
Or do you think it's more related to the like trauma of
you
of
know,
more childhood stuff?
yeah, so I think for our generation, I think the answer is yes. I think the Me Too movement, there's a lot of fallout that came from that. There's also some real good things that have come from that, which is just like, we're done not talking about it. Like, that's it. It's
Right.
stopping with us. And again, like, there's positives and negatives to that. I think one of the positives is that the younger generation, at least in my experience, is far more willing to have these conversations, where the
Mm,
older generation has to unlearn a lot of things before they're actually willing to tell the truth about their story, especially in the faith community, because there's this concept of like honoring your father and mother. And if I tell the truth about what happened, I'm dishonoring them. And it's like, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the honor of yourself and of what has happened is to tell the truth about your story.
yeah.
And the younger generations, I think, are more willing to do that. I'm thankful for that. I think there's a lot of good in that. Um, I think as a whole, men, and particularly men of color, are finally starting to go, okay, maybe we can. And
Mm,
this is what's so fascinating, is to dig into the subcultures of the different ethnic groups and figure out, like, like, I'm part, my father's from Puerto Rico, and like the Latino culture, like, the concept of boundaries is just like, no, no, everybody's in everybody's business. Like, no, what are you talking about? This is normal. It's like, that's actually called enmeshment. Like,
mm,
we need to draw some and so, like, I have clients in that culture that, like, they're wrestling this out
mhm,
because their parents are like, "You hate me," and they're like, "No, no, I love you. That's why I'm setting this boundary, because I want to be able to have this type of relationship with you." Um, and so it depends on the culture. Um, I would say as a whole, it seems like we're going in a more positive direction in terms of being able to talk about this stuff as men. Um, but I mean, the programming is old, right? And by the
yeah,
time you hit adulthood, like, that stuff is rooted so deeply in there, you may not even know until a situation comes up, and all of a sudden you're like, why did I say that? Where does that come from, right? And like, that's where the curiosity is important. If my shame is speaking to me, I'm not curious. I'm condemning myself. But if I can hold curiosity and space for, like, what is that? Let me explore that. Let me be curious about that as a man, and not just push it down. Like, there's a comedian named Bill Burr who did a special recently, and the first part of his special was all about why men drop dead and women don't. And it was all comedy, but there was a lot of truth into that, of just like, men stuff everything down and we wonder why they just tip over one day and die. And
mhm,
it's like, it's comedy, but there's some truth to that reality of not being able to offload the stress, and all of a sudden we have hypertension, high blood pressure, like all of these things manifest in the body because the body's like, we have got to get some of this off of us. And so I think for men, um, they have to fight against a lot of culture depending on their age. But I think the younger generations are being more willing, thankfully, to start to have these conversations at a younger age to be able to learn the language, talk about what's going on inside, and hopefully, and this is the hard part, hopefully find safe community with other men who are willing to actually talk and listen about this stuff. That is rare, and that is something that I'm trying to work toward is helping build communities for men to be able to talk about this stuff.
Mhm. I think that's powerful. So powerful because if they don't have anyone, like, in your community or, that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know anyone." Like, how can I have these in-depth conversations about how I'm feeling when I've never done this with, my group of guys? Like,
Hmm.
what are they gonna do? They're gonna judge me. So, I think
Hmm.
building that, for the person that is open to it, is what we need at this point.
Yeah.
And, okay, I'm gonna transition a little bit to our role as women.
Hmm.
What do you feel like, so if there is something going on in the family, if you feel there's addiction or trauma that is present, regardless if it's, quote, making an issue or not, I think the health of holding it all in is going to manifest, like you said, in some form,
Hmm.
especially when our nervous system is not wired for that stress and tension for extended periods of time and what that can do from you from a longevity and a quality of life standpoint.
Hmm.
However, most guys are, completely unaware of your work. So how do we support them without being the naggy wife or girlfriend?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. First thing I want to say is for any woman who's listening who may be aware that their husband um, whatever the word is, struggle is a
Mhm,
subjective term, but it is watching pornography, struggling with pornography. First thing I want to say to that partner or spouse, it's not your fault.
mm,
Like, please hear me when I say that. Like, it's not your fault.
mhm,
And like the hope is that there's at least a breath of relief for anyone hearing that maybe in that spot where it's like, well, what do I need to do so that
yeah,
he stops? And that is not your responsibility or your role or any of it. Like that is on him. You can
mm,
support him for sure, but ultimately that's up to him. And so many partners end up taking almost a mother role to their partner to go like, what do I need to do to get him to stop? And it's like that is not the question to ask. And that pressure that you're feeling, that's not yours to take because he is ultimately responsible for his autonomy and his decisions. So hopefully like there's at least a breath of relief to go like it's not your role or your responsibility for him to stop. But as far as like what does support look like and the word nagging that you said, um I think one of the things that's really, really, really important for the partner to understand is that he was not born this way. And why I say that is because empathy on both sides of the street are important. It's
mhm,
really part of my role is to help the guy understand, particularly if he has crossed physical lines with someone who is not his spouse or his partner. Is it's like your wife or partner has now experienced what's called betrayal trauma, which is a
mm,
real documented thing that happens to the partner. And my role is to help them understand what you have now done and help them to learn how to hold space and empathy if their partner wants to try to work it out. That's up to her. Like again, like that's up to her. The other side is that the guy didn't wake up as a little kid and be like, you know what would be really fun? To just wreck my life with pornography.
hmm, mm,
It's two things. One, he wasn't born this way. And two, as hard as it is to understand, it's not random. There's a book. written by a guy named Jay Stringer. It's called Unwanted. And he is a licensed mental health counselor and an ordained minister. So he takes this, for me, incredibly beautiful clinical studied world and merges it with the faith world in ways that are just very rare right now, that I think, for me, we need more of. He did a study of over 3,800 people across gender, ethnic, socioeconomic, and regional lines to try to figure out, is there anything that we can learn about unwanted sexual behavior? And the thing that he saw was that it's not random at all. In fact, it's all about your story.
Hmm.
And so that's why one of the sayings that I've adopted, it's not mine, but I've adopted it, is your story is your roadmap to freedom. And
Hmm.
so that's why knowing your story is so important, because we think on my side of the street with the guys I work with and on the other side, we think it's just random. We think it's like, well, no, he's always done this. He's always wanted to do this. But the reality is that there are parts of his story that are unhealed, that are fueling his addiction that he may not even know. And by actually digging into his story and realizing, yeah, that abuse you experienced, it pushed you in this direction. The neglect of your dad walking out on your family and you now having to step into the role of the father figure at age 12, you think that stressed and pushed you in the direction of part, like, it's not random. And so for the partner, the ability to hold space and not view the guy as just some sociopath or heap extra shame onto him while holding space for her own hurt is an extremely difficult balance. And I want to acknowledge that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's difficulty on both sides of the street. There's difficulty on our side of the street holding space for a partner who is just hurting and says something sometimes in her hurt where it's like, man, that is like, those are like verbal daggers. Being able to hold space for her and her pain. What I'm asking is, can the other side of the street do that as well? Like, can we both try to pursue empathy if we want to make this thing work? If you don't, and you want to, and you have every right to leave, like, leave, that's fine. But if you want to stay, there's just going to be some hard conversations that are going to have to be had. And the only thing that can hold true space and handle the weight of those conversations is empathy, is understanding that he didn't pop out of the womb this way. He was
Mm-hmm.
made this way, which means he's going to have to be unmade and then remade. And can you hold space for that? And if you can't, that's okay. There's no judgment. I'm just saying, like, this is part of the road, is being able to hold space for where he is and seeing the best parts of him and not letting the worst parts of him define him in that moment. So the ability to hold empathy for both sides of the street, I think, is just unbelievably important. It's also one of the hardest things on this journey for both sides, has the
Yeah, I
ability
can't
for the guy
imagine going
to
through that.
right, like, for the ability for the man who has done that to emotionally mature enough, because if the guy's 45 years old physically, but emotionally he's probably 14, 15. And so he's got to now catch up to how old he is physically. And that's part of my work, is to help him emotionally mature. He's now got to plant his feet in the ground with a hurting wife or hurting partner and sit there and listen to her pain and realize that not all of it, but a lot of it is him. And he's got to own that. He's got to sit with that and realize, like, I have done this. And that's part of being a man, part of being mature. The same part is true on the other side of the street, which is, can you hold space while you see him working? If
Mm-hmm.
he's not doing anything, I get it. You want to bounce, like, totally. If he's like, you have reasons at that point to go, like, I don't see any change here. But for the partner or the spouse that's experienced betrayal trauma, what ends up happening is, in an effort to protect and survive emotionally, you dehumanize your partner.
Hmm.
And when you dehumanize your partner emotionally, it's, he is the problem, he's a pervert, he's all these things. And it's easier to do that than to rehumanize or keep him human and go, he is a broken man who needs a lot of help, and I'm willing to walk with him. Those are two different views. And I'm not judging either view. I'm just saying this is part of the work on both sides, is the call to deep empathy. And the empathy looks different because the situations on each side of the street are different. But for the couples that I've seen that make it, and not only make it, but thrive, the empathy it's a non-negotiable. It doesn't mean that you don't struggle to hold it. It means that you're working on your side of the street to go, I'm going to make sure that I try to keep him human as long as he's doing the work. And for him, it's going, I have taken her mind, which is this glass heart, and I've dropped it on the ground. And
Hmm.
there's 200 pieces on the ground now. And she's got to try to pick them up. And I'm going to try to help her in the ways that she wants me to help her and hold space when she's upset and she's angry and she hates me. That's the call. If you're going to try to actually thrive as a couple. And so that's why some people just walk away, and there's no judgment. I get if both sides aren't committed, especially the guy, if he's just like, I'll do a little bit here, a little bit there. It's like, no, 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 no. Like you are called to so much more than that. So both sides need deep empathy. It looks a little bit different, and like it's heaven. But as far as like your original question that you asked, I want to also give them kind of the framework for what to look for in the guy, which is
Hmm.
if he's kind of ho humming and it's like this and that, it's like he's got to want it for himself more than
He's
even
good.
the marriage, I would say, um, because he needs to want to get better for himself, and then the
Right.
marriage will thrive. But if he's doing it for the marriage and it ends and he is resentful and doesn't want it, then you really know he wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it to try to save face or whatever.
Hmm. I'm just like speechless. This is so fascinating to me because it it really comes down to addiction in all forms. Like
Correct.
it's not just pornography. I mean, you could put the label on anything, like you said, any sort of addiction, food, drugs, alcohol.
Mhm. The
Yeah,
roots
it's
are all
just
the same. They're all the
yeah,
same.
it's and male or female too, right? Like I'm assuming that this will overlap with female trauma too. It's
Yeah,
just not your specialty, but
correct.
it it's just it's so interesting to me how like my world is all about the nervous system and rewiring the nervous
Mhm.
system
Mhm.
from
Yep.
a sympathetic to a parasympathetic,
Yes.
and it's it's essentially doing the same thing. We got to rewrite the story that had been framed from childhood and how that trauma or event or what have you from a very little age can literally just set that foundation
Mm,
to a life that we didn't want. And
correct. Yeah.
um, that's interesting. So I'd love to dive in a little bit. You've talked a lot about your work. There's an aspect of your work we haven't really touched on, which is somatic work.
Mhm.
And this work is I'm familiar, but I am by no means an expert on it. Walk us through what that kind of therapy looks like in not just, talking and having these sessions and working through the hard stuff from like a mental, emotional,
Mhm.
and I guess physical, but this is definitely a physical type of work and game changer for trauma recovery. So how do you help people that have lived in their heads forever kind of reconnect with their body? And can you walk us through maybe a couple simple somatic exercises?
Yeah, for sure. This is I mean, I love what I do. This is one of my favorite things because guys are just so oblivious. It's hysterical to watch. Where they're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah," and I'm like, "No, you don't know what you don't know right now, and that's okay." So,
Sure.
one of the first things that I'll just do with him is just what's called a body scan, like a simple body scan of like, "Hey, close your eyes." And for some guys, it's hysterical because they can't. They're such control freaks that they're like, I can see them, their eyes open. And I'm like, let's just stop. Tell me what's going on right now. Why can't you let go of control? Like, there's a screen in between us. You're safe. So what's going on? And that's why story work is so important because there's already things that I'm recognizing going like, okay, you felt out of control your entire life. And now that you've gotten some control back, you're not willing to give it up. What, to your point, what has that done to your nervous system at a young age to
Mhm.
wire you to be at a spot of fight or flight all the time? And how do we get you to come back down? one of the things I do is the first thing is just a quick body scan. When guys don't, a lot of guys are like, why do I need to know my body? I'm like, well, let's just do a body scan. Let's just see. And I have them close their eyes, typically 3 or 4 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then we start at the bottom of their feet. I'm like, feel your feet on the floor. And we just work our way up with their eyes closed. I'm like, just notice your body. Let's work your way up from your feet, through your calves, through your quads, through your hamstrings, through your groin, like, and just notice everything that's going on in your body. And more often than not, most guys are like, my body is like a Christmas tree lit up and I didn't even know it. I'm like, yeah, you are carrying that around all the time, every single moment of every single day. So once they get an understanding of like, maybe I do need to pay attention to my body. Well, then what I'll have them do is I'll have them do that throughout the week and write down what they see, and we'll figure out the things that are overlapping each day of like, I'm always feeling tension in my shoulders, or there's a spot in my gut that feels this way all the time. It's like, okay. So then live time, I'll have them do the same thing, and then we're going to bring awareness to the gut or to their shoulders or to whatever. And we're just going to explore what's there. Tell me about it. What does it feel like? How big is it? What shape is it? What do you think about when you're bringing awareness to it? And now we're just exploring what their body's been carrying. If you've done nervous system work, I mean, you're probably familiar with like the OG book, The Body Keeps the Score, that like by Bessel van der Kolk, which is just like the standard. I mean, he's the one that opened it up for me where I was like, holy smokes, like that is true that I have all this stuff in my body. So from there, we start to figure out like, okay, this is where these things live. What is that associated with? And that's why the other domains are really important, is because we get the physical and then we start to work into the mental and the emotional and spiritual. Like, what's living here? Because something's there and there's probably a story behind it. And even if you can't remember the story, what does it feel like? What are the thoughts that come into your mind when you notice this thing? What are you associating that with? And we can typically piece together some sort of, normally like an implicit memory of, this happened back here and I don't remember all the details, but I remember how I felt. And depending on what realm of thought you look into with implicit memory, there's a good argument that the details don't necessarily matter. It's the feelings. It's the emotional memory, because that's the imprint on the person, the stamp on the person that they not only remember, but that becomes the way that they view things moving forward. And so, part of the somatic work is to try to create a new experience for them. Trauma is not just the bad events, it's what's left over, because there's no repair. And so now what we want to do is try to create a positive experience, not just for the mind, but for the body. Because a lot of guys are split where they can tell me the right answer up here, but their bodies don't believe it for a second. Their nervous systems are either super wired, super high, or they've dropped down into the shutdown mode, where in order to survive, they have turned themselves off emotionally. They've just shut the whole faucet off because it was too intense back here. There's too much chaos going on. There's too much abuse going on. And the little brains are like, this is all I got. We have to shut it off. And they've been living that way for decades. So for us, it's about how do we slowly turn that faucet back on? Because by turning the faucet back on, we're turning the hurt back on. And we're re-engaging these old wounds in order to try to provide new experiences for them. So somatically, it's a lot of exploration. One of the things is a body scan. Another thing that I will do that kind of ties in body work with rooted negative beliefs is I will have guys stare at a mirror for 60 seconds with a timer. Press a timer, stare at the mirror for 60 seconds, and just write down what you see. And what that does is guys rarely look at themselves in the mirror when it's not some sort of utility exercise. Brushing your beard, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, shaving, or lifting at the gym. Like, rarely do we ever just stop and look at who we are. And it's a haunting exercise. It's never fun for the guys. I do it periodically for myself. I still hate it. And Because what it does is it pulls out these beliefs, but what's associated with the beliefs is where they live. And that's why it's so important, is you're pulling on these strings physically and mentally to figure out what is going on. So the somatic work, it's a lot of exploration, and it's also some things to help guys get more comfortable with their body. Another thing I'll do that I stole from the place I went to is what's called 3-2-1, which is, and I'll send guys like an actual thing of like a feelings wheel, because guys are like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm like, here's 50 emotions, pick one. Um, three emotions, two sensations in the body, and there's a list of those as well, and one negative cognition. I'm not enough. I am unlovable. I don't deserve good things, whatever. And I'll have them write that down for a week, again, to try to help them to get more and more comfortable back in what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What are the sensations? Just like anything else, it's all about reps and practice. People think
Mm.
we are just born understanding this stuff, and intuitively, in some ways, that's true. But other than breathing, just about everything else we're taught. We're taught how to eat. We're taught how to tie our shoes. We are potty trained. Like everything we are taught. And so for men, there's a shame around not knowing how to do it. It's like, you were never taught how to do this. What could you
Mhm.
possibly expect? You were taught how to do either something else or culture and your imagination filled in the gaps. So what does it look like to give yourself some compassion and some empathy for yourself to enter into this work, knowing that it's 6 months from now, if you take it seriously, you're going to be a very different man.
So powerful. It's such good work, and it seems like too simple to be true, right? Like, oh, just do a body scan, but it's so
Mhm.
much deeper than that because I've done some myself with some coaches and therapy, etc. And gosh, for me, there was a lot of crying, and I wouldn't say I'm an easy crier either, but I'm sure you
Mm,
get that too with your clients that you work with. But it's so much deeper than just like, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do have tight shoulders." It's like, "Well, no, what does that mean?" Like,
yeah,
let's dive in. Let's get curious about it. And I think that's also true from a nervous system is as you start to unwind, um, as you start opening curiosity, like you can't get curious when you're firing in a fight or flight mode. Like
correct,
you
correct.
cannot have that curiosity even with your spouse or with yourself and how you're doing. And curiosity is like the coolest thing ever. That's where creativity lies. That's where growth lies. And when we're stuck in that stress mode. So it's not like it to me, it impacts so many other things than yes, I think when we think of addiction, we think of how it impacts our relationships, but number one, ourselves. But then you add in, financials, you add in your career, you add in business, you add in all these other layers of friends and socialing and you realize how when you start to really truly heal yourself, that impact is so much greater than I
Yeah,
think the original why.
yeah. The
But
addiction. One of the things that talk with guys about is like, if you don't want to think addiction is affecting everyone around you, then you're lying to yourself. You've disassociated from your own reality, because
mm,
addiction affects everyone. The stats are, it's like, I think addiction on average affects 3 to 4 people in the immediate circle of the person. And it's like,
mm,
scale that out over
mhm,
340 million people in this country. And it's like, there's a good chance everyone at some point is affected by it. But the good news is that recovery affects everyone in your circle as well. And so
mhm,
it's like, well, if that's the case over here, how do we shift into, the concept of recovery? And I love what you said about the nervous system. The game changer for me in my own, because I still go to trauma therapy 3 years out, every 2 weeks, and I do EMDR, brain spotting, and stuff that just helps get my body rewired into less of an anxious state. The game changer for me was when my trauma therapist was like, you are trying to focus on the why when you're activated or triggered. And he's like, that's pointless. He's like, you need to focus on the what. The why doesn't matter when you're triggered. And what was happening was I would be anxious and I'd be having these anxiety moments, and I'd be trying to be curious about why I'm anxious, but I can't figure out my anxiety. And now I'm getting more anxious because I can't
Mm.
figure out my anxiety. And the
Mm-hmm.
cycle just spun out of control. He's like, you got to stop doing that. It's about the what. What do I need to do to come down in the moment? And then when we're back into our window, then we can talk about the why. And I was like, okay, so just put the why
Yes.
on the back burner and let's come down. Or if I'm in shutdown, let's come up out of my shame, and then we can be curious. So
Mm.
for women listening to this podcast, it's like if you're wrestling with anxiety or whatever, the why doesn't matter in the moment. It does matter, but not in that moment. It's about the what. What do you need to do to come down or come up out of your shame? And then when you're back in that homeostasis spot in the middle of your window, then bring curiosity back into the picture and go, I wonder what that was about. But in the middle of it,
Yeah.
it's like in the middle of the storm, like asking philosophical questions about life. And it's like, no, I need to find land. I need to get
Yeah.
out of this storm and
Yes.
find land, And it's like, oh yeah, that is right. So just, I love how you said that because that's so important to realize.
Yeah. I think having that hope of realizing like my nervous system is just not firing in that state right now. Like, let's pause this and shift. It's not that like I can never go there. Like I do want to get curious, but right now
Mhm.
my nervous system is so triggered. It's like a kid throwing a tantrum. Like you can't teach them the lesson while they're screaming on the floor.
Mm-mm. That's
They're not
right.
going to learn anything in that state. It's
That's right.
it's that afterwards of when you have to have that conversation. Speaking of, so we're healing, like we're all healing. You work with clients all the time.
Mhm.
Now, as they're on their healing journey and as they're getting healthier and um, just stronger in every aspect, how do we prevent this from happening? Like, how do we go into let's lead this next generation into not recovery, but prevention, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's like after we have done the work on ourselves, and I think that's where it has to start. Like we can't
Correct.
teach from a place we're not at. But
2000%.
now that we're healing or, made the choice to start healing, how can we start leading the next generation into healthy boundaries and
Yeah. Yeah.
healthy lives, really?
It's a great question. And I feel like we're starting to scratch the surface on that question because we've gotten, Bessel van der Kolk, the guy who wrote the Body Keeps the Score, and Brene Brown and Gabor Mate and all these people who are just incredible. There's a lot of good kind of reactive care out there now, and
Hmm.
that's good. And now I think the question that is being asked is proactive care. Like, how do we get ahead of this now? So, a couple things. First thing, you have to continue to work on yourself. You have to. Remember being at a conference where these with a guy named Adam Young, who's I'm a big fan of, and he noticed we were having this Q&A session, a couple hundred guys in the room, and he noticed that everyone was asking questions about parenting. And he's like, he paused and he's like, are you guys thinking about all this story work stuff through the lens of just being a parent? And they were like, yeah. He's like, stop doing that. He's like, if you want to be a better parent, the data's clear, do your own work.
Mm.
Like you're trying to do behavior modification when your inside world is still chaotic. That's not how it
Mm.
works. You have to do your own work first and the rest of it will flow. And it got real quiet real quick. And it was like,
Hmm.
okay. So first thing is doing your own work. Second thing, and this is probably one of the hardest things for parents and for people in general, is you have to not let your shame prevent difficult conversations.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is the exact thing we started with at the very beginning, which is parents in their own shame don't know how to have these conversations with their kids, so they just don't have them.
Hmm.
But I promise you, those conversations are being had by the kid with somebody, whether it's
Yep.
friends at school, whether
Yep.
it's their own imagination, whether it's their shame saying they're not talking to you about this because there's something wrong with you.
Hmm.
That kid's parents talked about it with him. Why aren't your parents talking about this with you? There's something wrong with you. Now shame is speaking over them. Shame is extremely powerful. And so do not let your shame keep you from having these conversations with your kids. Because as you learned today, we're talking 8 years old. We're not talking 15. We're talking now.
Right.
So what does it look like to start that conversation? I have one client who um he his kid came to him, was like, Dad, I got to talk to you about something. And he confessed to how his friend told him to look up this website and it was pornography. And internally, he was like, I was freaking out. And yet he was able to stay calm and kind of be curious and hold space and have this 45-minute conversation with his son about it and not shame him for it. Tell him about how he's going to set up boundaries on the computer and laptops and things like that, why he was doing it. And at the end of the conversation, his son said to him, Dad, I'm glad I can come to you and talk to you about anything.
Hmm.
And I
Mhm.
was like, a proud parent with this client where I'm like, dude, like, you don't know, like, you and I got into this because we didn't have that. So
Yeah.
you are now shifting the culture of your home. He's still going to have to navigate difficult waters. There's no doubt about it. But it's that type of environment that needs to be created with kids and with friends where they can come to you and you hold empathy and compassion. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences for your actions. There always are. And that's what gets confused with men about empathy. So I'm just supposed to accept everything? No, no, but we need to hold space so that the truth can come out. And if
Mhm.
consequences need to be had, then they need to be had. But that doesn't negate this space of safety and curiosity that we need to learn how to hold with kids and with our friends and with other people so that this stuff that we're so ashamed of can come out. Because shame only has power when it's secret. When we bring that out into the light, it's like a fog, it dissipates and we can start to let that stuff go. So that would be the second thing. And the third thing I would say is find people who are safe people.
Hmm.
This is hard work for men because there are not a lot of guys out there. And I've been in this for years now, and I'm still like, man, where are you all? Like trying to find, and I have my group of guys, but it took years to build,
Yeah. Mhm.
So like finding for guys a safe group um, where you can genuinely talk about anything. I have that 2 week experience in Colorado that I was talking about. I met 9 other guys there from around the country and no electronics for 2 weeks, no TV, no nothing. Group therapy for 10 hours a day.
Wow.
And we were torn down to the very foundations of who we were. And the Wednesday night after we got out, we set up a Zoom call and we've been meeting for 3.5 years ever since. Every single one. Tonight, 9 o'clock. I will be on that call for probably 3 hours. When we hop onto that call, our whole life is up for grabs. Any
Mm.
question is fair game. And we have built that because we know we need it.
Right.
So the three things I would say are don't stop your own work. Don't let your shame stop you from having the conversations you need to have and have healthy community where, at least for me being in recovery from addiction myself, but I would say for any of us, like having that space where our life is up for grabs because, and one of the guys in my group said this and I love it. Nobody lies to me better than me.
Hmm.
And I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
There are pockets of my life where I'm like, I am lying about that. Didn't even know it until you called it.
Mhm.
That's really healthy. And in a culture of toxic positivity where no one can tell you that you're wrong, which I do not think is healthy, we need safe spaces where someone can go, hmm, what about this thing? It's not a judgment, it's a question. And I go, yeah, you're right. I've been fooling myself here. That's so important. So, so important.
Yeah. That community is huge.
Mhm.
That support. They talk about it all the time, relationship capital. That's what it
Yes.
is.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's right. That's absolutely right.
Yes. All right. Um, we're kind of coming to our end.
Mhm.
I could talk to you for a lot longer than this. Your work is just absolutely fascinating to me. But the title of the podcast is Love Your Life and Yourself. So,
Mhm.
before I ask you the last question, where can we find you? Are you working on anything new? Do you have any upcoming events or anything like that? Where can anyone see your work?
Yeah. Thank you. So I just launched a new program called Men Worth Following. And
Hmm.
the whole thing is exactly what we were talking about, which is helping guys, two parts, helping guys to find freedom from addiction. This program specifically, porn and sex addiction, my one-on-one stuff, I do work with guys with alcohol and other things, but this
Yeah.
program is more specifically for porn and sex addiction. Um, but also, there's a faulty belief that if I just stop what I'm doing in my addiction, I'll become the man I'm supposed to be. Couldn't be further from the truth. You have to
Mm.
work at that. You have to work to now become the very thing that you want to be. So the second part of that is first part is freedom from addiction. And then the second part is really becoming the husband, man, and father that you want to be, specifically relationally, with empathy, holding space for your spouse, for your kids, for your employers, for your employees, and stuff like that. So that you can find at www.menworthfollowing.com. For any guys listening or any women listening who are like, I think my husband could really benefit from this. Which, quick side note, I'm kind of throwing guys underneath the bus here. A lot of the times it's the spouse that does the initial research, and then the guy catches up, which is really sad. That makes me so frustrated, and I don't like that. But that is just kind of where we are right now. Is he gets discovered, she's doing all the research, and she's like, I think you should look at this. So if that's you listening to this podcast, please check out Men Worth Following. Type in your name and email, and then you get a link to the video. And it's a long video, but it shows the 4-step process in the 4 domains that I was talking about that we walked the guys through. It's very, very thorough. So you're going to see everything there. So www.menworthfollowing.com is where they can find the information.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And one last question
Mhm.
is, what advice would you give our listeners to love themselves and their lives even more?
Yeah. I think I would just reiterate that if you find yourself in a space where you are trying to support a partner who's got an addiction, it's not your fault. And I would also say, if you want to love yourself well and you find yourself in that spot, find some good help. Don't just wait for him to get better, because that may never happen.
Mm,
You have to worry about you at that point. And it's not about throwing him to the side, it's supporting him like we talked about earlier with empathy, but find help for yourself, because the chances are that if you're loving someone with addiction, you have gone through trauma, period. Whether it's alcohol, sex, whatever. So find good help for yourself and make sure that you're choosing help for yourself, so that if he does work on himself, then your marriage can actually thrive. And if he doesn't, you're still going to be okay.
yeah. Thank you so much, Michael.
Mhm.
This has
Yeah.
been a blast,
Yeah.
and an honor.
Mhm.
Really appreciate your time
Yeah.
and
Thank you for the work
knowledge.
that you're doing too.
Thanks for tuning in to Love Your Life and Yourself. I hope today's episode gave you one more tool or one more truth to help you thrive in your health, happiness, and resilience. Remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's leadership. And it's the foundation for building a life that actually feels like yours. If this spoke to you, hit that follow button, leave a review, and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. And if you want to dive even deeper, grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Love Your Life and Yourself. It's the heart behind this podcast, and it's helped thousands of women step into a life they actually love. You can find it at drashleyrath.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care of you and keep choosing to love your life and yourself.